Hey everybody, my name is Raul Smith. I'm the head of development at Galactic Digital Studios, and I am the host of the Closing Tag Podcast Network. Now, for those of you that may not have been around back when I did the podcast back in 2000, 2001, 2002 ish, I want to kind of film this to give you guys a quick reintroduction, but at the same time, reintroduction for those that have actually seen and heard the podcast before, but a introduction for those that may be stumbling onto this for the first time, since apparently all of the archived episodes have been erased from the podcast feed, which is fine. So, a brief history of what the closing tag is, how we got to this point, and kind of where things are going to go from here. First and foremost, who the hell is this guy? That be me. Well, to be brutally honest, I'm a nobody. I was born and raised in some podunk town called Ogden, Utah, and I am a small business owner, hence Galactic Digital Studios. I'm also, a head of development for another small business in the area, Jolar Inc. I'm also a podcast host, hence the podcast, and I'm also a game enthusiast. We'll get into that here in a bit. But I'm also very dedicated, very empathetic, and very opinionated. Just because I am anti-Trump, let's get this out of the way first. Just because I'm anti-Trump doesn't mean I'm liberal. Keep that in mind. Just because I'm anti-Trump doesn't mean I'm pro-Biden. So, what do I have opinions about? We'll get into that here in a bit as well. But I'm also a father. I have a 16-year-old stepson who I've semi-adopted. And I also have a 9-year-old daughter. So, with introductions out of the way, what is the Closing Tag Podcast? Or what was the Closing Tag Podcast? We'll get into the was and, where we're at here in a bit. The Closing Tag Podcast was originally conceived back in late 2000, early 2001, out of frustration with a lot of things, out of kind of a lack of variety podcasts. I want to say that the Closing Tag Podcast was originally conceived to be a tech and development centric podcast that occasionally sprinkles in stuff like politics, sprinkles in stuff like sports. I'm a huge sports enthusiast, by the way. Go Jazz. I'm also very opinionated on entertainment. You'll see me talking a lot about pro wrestling, about Marvel, about DC, the dumpster fire that is. You'll hear me talk a lot about life tips. I am an aspiring cook. I love to cook whenever I can. Just yesterday I still cooked some pork tacos. Outdid myself again. I also like to talk about road tripping because I love road tripping. If I had the money, I would road trip all the time. Like, I would stop by the house once a month, and be like, here's the rent. Bye. See you in about 28 days. But sadly, I don't have the money for that. So, I also like to talk about tech. I am passionate about technology and development. I'm a web developer by choice. I was not thrust into this. It wasn't something that I would just happen to be good at. This is something that I sought out to do as a career. So I am very passionate and very vocal about technology and about development and about all the changes that are going on in that world. One of my favorite sayings actually is change is inevitable and it is constant. And you'll notice that that is a very driving focal point on this podcast, regardless of what I'm talking about. Change is a very driving focal point for the podcast because it is a driving focal point in our lives, or at least it should be. Some people don't like change, and that's fine. They can live in the Stone Ages. We're fine. Now, where we're going from here, I didn't want to just bring back the Closing Tag podcast as it was, because let's be honest, it wasn't good. It was all over the map. Like I said, it started out as a tech-centric podcast with other stuff sprinkled in. The other stuff kind of just overtook everything. So what I have decided to do with the Closing Tag is I've decided to branch it out into different venues, into different arenas, if you will. And now we have podcasts that are geared, that are focused on these different topics. We have one for politics and news and current events. We have one for sports. We have one for entertainment. Yes, pro wrestling falls under entertainment and not sports because, let's be honest, it's not an actual sport. They're athletic, they're great at what they do, and they train like they're athletes, but it's not a sport. It is a predetermined form of entertainment, which is fine. It's no different from Breaking Bad or from Game of Thrones or from anything else that you might see on TV. It's a lot realer than reality TV, let's put it that way. I have one focused on life tips. So your cooking tips, your road tripping tips, your tips on how to go out and enjoy nature. Maybe once in a while, I'll sprinkle in some tips on how to do better yard work or do better, keeping up on your lawn. Here's one for free. Don't water in the middle of the day. Water acts as an amplifier for the sun. You are killing your lawn more than you're helping it. Water at night or very early in the morning. Just putting it out there. And of course, we wanted to go back to our roots, back to tech and dev. And I have a podcast specifically geared and engineered for that. So, all of that, plus, this is the gaming part. I used to have a gaming channel on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook called GameStream. It had its own website, all the bells and whistles, what have you. That has now been changed to a gaming channel / podcast. So, all of the game streaming stuff that people on Twitch and YouTube that they're used to is now still going to be there, but now the Closing Tag Podcast Network is kind of bringing that in and making it a podcast as well. So occasionally you'll hear me playing games on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and this particular feed that you're hearing this now on. At the same time, with all of these different podcasts that are now geared and engineered towards specific topics or genres, I wanted to kind of reflect that same element on the website, while at the same time reintroducing another passion of mine, which is writing. So if you go to theclosingtag.com, you will see that there's a blog setup for the main channel for the closing tag, but you'll also see the separate channels on the website, and each one of those now has a blog as well. Another thing that you'll notice on the Closing Tags website, theclosingtag.com, you have to put the in there, and it's all one word, no hyphens. If you go to that website, you'll notice on each of those websites there's also a donate button. I'm just putting this out there. While I don't do this as a regular full-time job, I would ultimately like it to be a regular full-time job. But I can't do that if it's not bringing in money. Because unfortunately, until the inevitable rise of complete and total socialism in this country, which I don't see that happening in my lifetime, until that happens, we kind of need money to survive. So the donate button is there. If you want to donate to the podcast, I'm not going to force people to, but it would be greatly appreciated. Just saying. Now, where we're going from here, as far as the podcast network, as far as Game Stream, as far as everything is concerned. Right now, I'm working out all the kinks and the details, hence why I'm recording this. I'm recording this as kind of like a reintroduction to reset up the podcast feed. Once I have everything set up, right now the tentative plan is to start streaming either the first or second week of October of 2023. After that, the first series of episodes should start dropping on October 16th. I will probably start with something that I talked about recently on one of the blogs, whether it be the Damian Lillard trade that happened just a couple of days ago, or the Unity hot garbage that's going on there. I may talk about Trump's 4 indictments, as well as the hot mess that he's gotten himself into with the New York district judge now. I may talk about something else. I don't know. I have to play it by ear. Something could happen within the next 2 weeks that could just completely derail everything. I was not expecting the Damian Lillard trade to happen. I'll be brutally honest with you. I was not expecting that to happen. When I saw that on my Facebook feed, I was like, holy shit. Yes, I swear, on this podcast. Quite a bit. I originally wanted to make it PG. I originally wanted to make it child friendly. But ultimately, once I was no longer living with my kids full time, I basically just said, fuck it. Just let it rip. So, that's the game plan as it stands. First series of episodes, and they will be properly labeled. So you'll see the closing tag, on life, the closing tag on news, the closing tag on tech, the closing tag on sports, the closing tag on entertainment. They'll be properly labeled as I put it out on the feed. So then that way, if you don't want to hear me talk about sports, if you don't want to hear me talk negatively about Trump, you can just skip that episode and move on with your life. And I will not be offended. There's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. Method to the madness. So, I appreciate everybody listening for the last 15 minutes. I appreciate you watching me as my eyes are going all over the place here. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, yeah, my eyes are going all over the place. It's ADHD. It's not diagnosed officially as ADHD, but I'm saying it's ADHD because, yeah, I have that. I'm pretty confident of that. So, keep an eye out on Facebook, on YouTube, on Spotify, on all the major podcasting platforms. Keep an eye out for this podcast going forward. And as I've said at the beginning or at the end of every podcast episode, from episode 1 to episode 26, and I will continue to say it from episode 27 and beyond. Remember to include your closing tags. Have a good day, everybody.